I'm gonna be using an asynchronous function to use the fetch method to get request data from an API, third-party API. So I have this API here, which is the HTTP openweathermap.org API, and that as far as this API, I've already worked on it, and then I have this API going into getting whatever CD we require it to get, and then also the API key, which I have somewhere on top of this page. Like I'm trying to get away from people seeing it. It's basically an API key. So then I have this other comment section right here that I commented out, and basically with the documentation for the weather API, if you wanted to get like image, you want to make use of the image. This is the URL link you will be appending or concatenating with whatever um, um, property you already got from the API. So I'm just gonna show the beginners how to manipulate APIs, and then how to use the asynchronous, which is the asynchronous function, which is the async await method to get the API. So let's go ahead and start doing it. So first of all, I would uncomment this. So like I said, I already have this in backtick, and then I have a CD, and then I have my API key, which is legit. It's somewhere up there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and set this to a variable. So let me see. So what do we call this? We can call this query URL for now. Query URL, and cool. So we have that set up, and then let's just go ahead and set that CD variable name. So we can say let CD, we can call that CD for now. Let's just say Atlanta, because I'm out here in Atlanta. And okay, cool. So and I already know what the weather looks like today. Okay, cool. So we have that done. Now that we have CD and the endpoint created, let's just jump into the fetch method. So to run the async function, you have to first of all use the reserve keyword, which is the async. Async. So basically, when we do async, then async awaits a function itself. So we're going to do async, then function. So if you wanted to pass this to a variable and use the arrow function, I'm just going to go straight vanilla JavaScript on creating my function. So it's just async. I'm going to call this function. What name would I call this function? I could call it query data. Query data sounds good and cool. So, yeah, so now that I have that function, I'm just going to go ahead and invoke that function. So whatever we're doing, it's available for us to see. And just so you know, I'm going to be doing a lot of console log, because this is the method I'm going to use to communicate. I'm going to be using that method to communicate with whoever people or whoever's watching this video and trying to get the knowledge of how to use this APIs. And also, I will be manipulating the DOM with the JavaScript by also sending this image that have been already created, that we will be creating, to the browser. So yeah, so definitely just keep your hands crossed and watch as I console log and explain everything, break down the code bit by bit. Okay, so we have that. So let's just go ahead and console log a message. So we have our sorry about that. Console log. So I'm just gonna console log calling. So you see that this API actually is running. I'm sorry, this function actually is running. Okay, so we have that in the console log right here, Colin. So the first thing we want to do is to, now that we have the async, we want to await. We want to use the await method to await data response from this endpoint, which is the variable query URL. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a variable to hold that, and we can call that um, response. So let's just go ahead and call it response, and then what we're going to do with response is to await. Use the keyword await. So this actually kind of like awaits the data, the response of the endpoint. So when we use await, we want to use this fetch method. Remember, I told you we will be using the fetch method. So fetch, and then what we are fetching, you see here in the console log, I have the fetch method is already yelling out and it's saying that it needs one argument. So one argument required, and we do not have one. So these are ways you can understand how to code by always making sure to go through your developer tool to see what's going on under the hood. So it helps improve your skills as a developer. So what would be that endpoint? That argument we're supposed to pass to fetch. It definitely would be the variable that we're storing this URL, the API URL that we are using to get the CD, and also we have an API key. That's why it's legit and working. These are the parameters. If you wanted to know more about this, you can go to this weather map and it will give you all the setting parameters for you to be able to get whatever desired data you want to get from that endpoint. So from that API. So now we're just going to call in this variable inside of here. So we're doing await fetch query URL, and then we want to also get this URL to. Okay, so let's, at this point, I'm just gonna do something real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and console log rest real quick so that we can see that going on, what's going on under the hood with the response and stuff. So now I have that console log. You see that we have this response coming in, and basically what this is just basically the status of our request. So it's telling us we have a 200 status, which we know that that status code is a perfectly good status code, and it's saying the status text is okay. Type is a course. You need to look deep into no understanding what the course is, and then it's just telling us we have the headers and the body use and every other good things we need to know that this API is actually a legit one and functioning. So now that I've console logged that, what I want to do is that I'm going to use this variable res, and that's the only variable I would be using. As far as fetch method, we always take in like two promises, but because we are using this async await function, I'm going to use this variable to. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and do it and explain it to you. So at this point, I want this this response we're getting, that is actually a good response. I want to convert that into a JSON so we can see the data that that response actually comes with. So to do that, I would say fetch dot, and then I would use the JSON a method. So you see what this JSON method does right here? It creates parentheses. It wraps is another await inside of parentheses, putting our first await outside and creating another parenthesis. So and then doing the same fetch method, query URL.json, and then if I go ahead and call that JSON, we will see that we have data coming in from the API. So cool. So we have data coming in, and this is Atlanta, and we want to go look into this list inside of the list in the first index, index 0. And if we go into weather, yeah, in the index 0, that's the only index in weather. We should see that we have, if we flip this a little bit, we have an icon right here. So this is what we're looking for to get. This icon is what actually holds the condition, the weather condition of the today's weather condition in the index 0. This is the icon, the key icon, which is a property that holds this actual value 01D that we're going into this object to get. So this is how you manipulate an API. So let's go back to the code. Let me break this down. So in this first await, if we remember, this await is what gives us the response, telling us it's a 200 and it's good. And then this other await, it's what actually helps us get the data, because at this point where we're calling this data to converting this data to a JSON format, this await method is what helps that, is what makes that available. So if, for instance, I took off this await method, I'm going to get an error saying that it's going to tell me a type error, and it says the fetch method I am using, it's actually giving the spread operator, it's cloning this query URL at this point. .json is not a function, and the reason why is because it's not converting into a JSON file. So we would definitely be calling this next await here to make that available. to make that available. So that's why you're getting this data. So let's just go forward. Now that we've gotten that, I want to quickly go ahead and comment this out and just kind of like break this down in a simple fetch method, JavaScript fetch method. So if we were doing a basic fetch method, we will be doing this, right? We will say fetch, and then we will go into that query URL that we were fetching from, and then we will use the promise, which is the .then promise, and we will take in the parameter. Let's just call that parameter response again, the arrow function, and then we will just convert that res into the JSON format. So at this point, if we come and pass in the next promise, we should know that we have our what's it called, data available at this point. So it could be res, and if we console log res, which holds the data, if we console, sorry about that, console the log res response, so we get, okay, so console, oh, we're not calling JSON, so we always have to invoke JSON because it's a method. So we calling JSON, and now we see we have the same data. So there's basically response, getting the response as a good response right here in this, at this point, and then converting that OK response into a JSON file, and then console logging it, putting it in another promise in console login that it could be data, could be response. You know, you always see it like this, so it makes more sense. So it's pretty much at this point, the second promise is pretty much a data. So we're not using that, we're using the async method. Let me get that out of the way. So let's go back, jump into this real quick. So now that we have this and we have our data, so what we want to do is, first of all, we want to go and get that actual icon value. So to do that, we will make use of this rest again, and then we would just say, oh, let's create a variable to store that. So we can say const, what do we call that? We can call that a result, and we just pass that to this rest. And if you notice, when we did, let's comment this out again so we can break this down for people who are getting to understand what's going on. So if you notice, when we go into this data, we have CD object and we have list object. And remember, I told you this is the object we want to go into. So we're going into the first one, which is the list. So we do rest.list, and then inside of this list, inside of the list, we're going into this first 0 index. We could go into any index and get what we want, but let's just start up with the first index. So to go into that, we will create an array box, and then we'll go into 0 index. Now we're in the 0 index. We are going to go into that 0 index, and then we want to go into this weather object. So if you notice, just to be fast, inside of weather object, we have to go into the 0 index of weather object before we can get access to this icon. So to do that, it will be in that 0 index, it will be dot weather, and weather also 0 index, and dot icon. So cool. So that's how we will be able to get into that data. So let's just console log that real quick to see. Let's console log results to see what we did. So now you see on line 383 we are having this 01D value out because we have that stored in rest result. So another thing I want you to know is that to have this displayed in the browser, we will have to convert this into a format that the browser understands. So to do that, let's just go ahead and convert this into a .png format. To do that, we will concatenate a string with the value in it, a string called .png like this. So if you notice, we now have in our console log 01D, which is the icon .png. That is ready for us. So the next step we want to do is to try to get this into an image image tag. Before we do that, I'm gonna go ahead. I have a div in the browser. In the HTML file with an ID called display, and that element with an ID called display is what we are going to be sending. It's the parent element, which is a div that we are going to be appending our child element into. So the child element is going to be the image we're about to create, and we're going to be appending that child into the parent element, which is going to be the div. And to get that div inside of JavaScript right now, we will have to, let's just go ahead and create a variable called display, and let's just set display to let's just go ahead and get that element in Java to this JavaScript file. So to do that, we will do document.get element by ID. For those of you who don't know what that is, document.get element by ID is a method we use. Get element by ID is the method we use to get an element from HTML by its ID name. Now the ID name for this element is called display. That's what I named it. So that's the only div I have inside of my HTML. So to confirm that, I'm just going to go ahead and console log display, the variable display, which holds that actual result. So if you look at my console log, now you can see I have a div with an ID called display. That's to show you that it's legit and it's right there. Okay, cool. And now the next step to do after doing this is to create that element, which is going to be the image tag. So to do that, we'll create another variable. We can call it const image. So image like that. Okay, const image. And to do that, we will be using this method called create element. So definitely we do document again dot create element. So that is the method we use to create elements in JavaScript. And if you look at the log, it's telling you here that the create element takes in one argument. So one argument is required, and we do not have any now. So the argument is actually the, what's it called? The element we will be creating, and that element it's the image element. So yeah, so always make sure when you call these methods, always make sure to look at the developer to see how to use this method. Some of them takes in two arguments, some take in one argument. That way you know what's going on under the hood, and it just gives you that it gives you that streamline to understand what you really working towards building and or developing developing. Yeah, so it takes in that image. So let's just go ahead and console that again. So we go in console log img, yeah, that we just created the variable img. And if you look at the developer tool, now we have an image. Now that we have an image, how do we get to this image? How do we use the data that we're getting from this endpoint, from this web API? How do we get that data into our image we just created? Now, if you know in HTML, if you were building an application and you created an image element and you wanted to reference that image element to get like a picture inside of your image folder or from Google, you would have to create that image element, and then inside of the image opening tag, you would create an src property which will have a value, and the value will be actually where you're getting that image from. So if you were creating an image, if you had a folder called images, it would be src equals to, in quotes, dot / assets / images / whatever image you're using, or it will be src https www. whatever image.png. So to do that, we will go ahead and create an src attribute, reference attributes to this image element we just created. To do that, we would use the method called set attribute. So we would say the variable name image dot set attribute. So this set attribute, if you invoke it, it tells you right here, it says 2 arguments required, but so we don't have any. So the reason why I'm doing this is to break down these things to you. So 2 arguments required here. What are the arguments required to set attribute? Remember, we want to set attribute to get the source inside of the image element and also the value. So definitely the set attribute is looking to listen to get the source itself, which is the property name, the keyword, and then the value of the source. So for now, we're just going to use a random value. So we're getting the src, and then the next one, it would be, let's just set it for now to HTTP unsecured. Oh, let's say secured. Okay, so now if we go back to a developer tool, now we have this set attribute with the image, and you see how it says src to HTTPS. Cool. Let's quickly go ahead and just duplicate this and create a class. So we set attribute, and the next attribute we want to work on would be a class. We want that image tag to have a class, and the name of the class would be, let's just call it image. So if we go back now, we have our image tag saying src, which is pointing to HTTPS, referencing to that, and with a class image. The usual way to get a class is to get it, let's just say best practice, on top of the source. So that makes it class image src HTTPS. That makes a lot of sense. Now, okay, so the next step of line we want to do is to make sure that we have this source value, the actual value. Now I have commented this out that I explained earlier on, the what's it called, the URL you use to point at images when you want to get from this actual weather map API, open weather map API endpoint. So I will need this. I would just go ahead and copy this, and then inside of this HTTPS, I'm not going to use this anymore. I'm going to use a backtick, like EX6 format way. I'm going to use the backtick, and then what I would do with the backtick is that I would paste in that URL, and then I would use the function $ with the curly braces to pass in that variable that we are getting, that we use to get the actual value, and set the format to a .png for the icon. So that would be the variable called result. So I'm going to pass in result inside of here. And when I do that, now you see that error goes away with the HTTPS, and now I have my source pointing to the actual reference, which is the HTTP open weather map.org img /w/ that result variable of value. Make sense? So now that I have that, I am good to go. So now that we have all of this, the next thing to do is to get this into the browser, because we already have an image now. Let's say we took this image, and let's just go ahead and grab this real quick. Let's copy this. I'm trying to copy this. Anyway, I was just trying to, and it's okay. So you have to command, I think it's right click. Yeah, this to get. But anyway, let's just slide for now. So I wanted to bring out the image on a browser, but let me just go ahead and complete this task, so we don't take a lot of time for this task. So now that we have that, then I have to append this image variable. I'm going to append it to this child element, which is this image. I'm going to append it to the parent element. To do that, we would use the method called, so we will be calling that this actual variable here called display, and display is the parent child, is the parent element. So we would do dot append child, which append the child. We will be passing in the child in the method. So you see, append child is telling us right here, it says the append child takes in one argument, which definitely will be the child element, which is img. So if we did img, now we have our image, if you can see it right here in the browser. And it's really sunny out here in Atlanta right now. I don't know I don't know the temperature, but it's really sunny out here right now. So yeah, so that's it. And then we can also see the temperature right now inside of our data if we wanted to. Just say we have a little time to see that, and that would be inside of weather, and it says clear sky. Um, it's giving us an ID. Okay, it's right here. The wind says 8.86, and the degree is 293. We would want to convert that to see that in actual. But anyways, cool. So now we see it's sunny. We can actually play with this data. We can check out what it looks like in, let's say, Toronto at the moment. So if we switch that to Toronto, you see it's cloudy in Toronto. Whoa, and it's sunny in Atlanta. Let's just check out Dallas. Let's see what it looks like in Dallas. Oh yeah, it's sunny, but at the same time raining in Dallas. It's raining out there in Dallas. That's cool. Also, let's just go back to Atlanta, Georgia, and Atlanta, Georgia. We're back in Atlanta, Georgia. It kind of says so. For some reasons, it's going into. We have the zero index for the least, and the weather is a zero index. Let's try to see. And the one index is going to be rainy tomorrow. Let's go back to the zero index. It's kind of cloudy now. It switched all the way from sunny to cloudy. This is strange. But anyways, this is how you get weather. This is how you get data from a third-party API by going into those objects with the dot notation till you get whatever you want to get at the end of the day. And then with the set attributes is the way you get the icon. So when I was asked, oh, how do I get the icon? How do they get this icon in the weather and all that? And some people were going on the browser to Google different types of icon, sunny icon. No, no, no. You have to go into the API because it's running live and it's live data. So you have to go into the API to extract that data. And we did that with the async function, which is the async await, asynchronous function, which is the async await, and by getting requesting the data with the fetch method. I hope this helps and you were able to get some one or two answers for the question. Thank you and have a good day. Bye bye.